In this series of videos, I'm going to show you how to create a simple bus route API. When I say simple bus route, it isn't going to take many lines of code. It's quite useful. It's been used on sort of Android and iPhone platforms in Google Maps. And the idea is that you can plot a route for a bus to take. As we see here, we've got Google Maps, and on Google Maps there are bus routes or bus stops, and I've got my mouse over a bus stop now, and if I click on that bus stop, it tells me a little bit of information about it, sort of what buses are going to stop there. So we've got the 23, the 30, the 31, the 35, and if we click on it we can actually get some sort of information. On an iPhone or Android, if you click on one of these, it would actually give you the route. But online using Google Maps, you just get the bus numbers and the time that they're going to appear. So the task that we're going to be choosing is, let's pick up today's date, today's time, when is the next bus going to arrive, and what's the route that it's going to take. So we're going to produce a program to do that, and we're going to do it in Python. To be able to do that, we need to know a few things. First of all, we need to know roughly about URIs, URLs, and we're going to need to know a little bit about latitude and longitude. That's really how we're going to find our location. And we're going to use APIs to pick that information up and help us so that we can create our own call to Google Maps using latitude and longitude and return information about that. So what we're really going to need, if we're going to find this latitude and longitude, we're going to use some Google Maps APIs, and there is one in particular which is free to use. The majority of the APIs that we are going to be using are free. However, you'll probably need to make an account to use them, and if you want to use them in a sort of professional way, then they've got pricing and plans for how many data hits you can have per month. So if you make an app and you put it on the Play Store or the iPhone App Store, then maybe you'll get too many hits per month, and the actual account will freeze, and you'd need to pay for a dedicated account on that one. So what we're going to be looking at is some geocoding. This one is free to use, and we don't actually need an account to use it. So if I go to the Google Maps geocoding, this is going to give us an API and how to use it. I'm not going to go into this too much. We'll probably deal with that in other videos. We're also stalling a little bit, and while we're waiting for that to load up, let's take a look at the other company that we're going to be using. Oh, we got there. So this gives us our details and the addresses that we're going to be using. So this is called a URI. Let me just explain a little bit about this URI. There's two parts to it, or two major parts. There is this sort of domain URI part before a question mark, and following the question mark there is the information you want to pass to the URI. We're going to be sort of hard coding this information, the bit before the question mark. We're going to hard code it, which means we're just going to type it in, but we're going to populate this from information we get from APIs, and I'll show you how to do that. Another little piece of information is down below. This is called a schema, and when we ask for the information from Google or from any API that we get, this is called a JSON response, and this is a schema showing you how the data is broken down. So it gives us a set of results, and in that set of results we have some address components, and in that address components we have a long name and a value for it. And one of our jobs is to actually go and pass through this schema to find the information that we need. And in our case, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting in a postcode or an address like this, and it's going to give us latitude and longitude values that we need to find a particular bus stop. And the way we're going to do it is we're actually going to find a postcode. So you might put in your postcode which isn't a bus stop, and it's going to have a rectangle around it, and it's going to see how many bus stops there are in that rectangle. There may be none, or depending on where you put your postcode, there may be one or more bus stops. So we're going to be able to choose from one or more bus stops on what we do. And to do that, we have, instead of just having a latitude and longitude, which is of your own sort of postcode, your own house, we're going to have a sort of viewport here with a box which gives us a northeast corner. So that's if I've got a rectangle like this, we're looking at the top right hand corner, and the southwest corner, the bottom left corner of the box. Our actual postcode will be in the middle somewhere, but we're going to check how many bus stops there are in that rectangle and then work out the route from it. Once we've got this information, we're going to come over to another company called Transport API. There's several companies that deal with bus routing information. Travelline is one, Nextbus is another. But this one seems to be really useful. It's got some documents. Inside those documents, there's a great deal of information for you to use for your programming. So let's take a look at this. Show you where we're going. If we scroll down, we will find documentation. Click on that, and then go to view documentation, and we have all the documentation we need to use these APIs, and there is a lot. If you want to do train, plane, bus, ferry, all the information is in here. It's quite simple to use, and the results that are returned are in JSON format, which is ideal for our Python program. So if we scroll down, this is just documentation, which tells us very little really. What we're looking for is a little bit further down the screen. There we go. So this gives us all of our calls that we need to make. It gives us the URI and what we call an endpoint to actually obtain the information. So we're looking for buses, and if we take a look down here, we've got all the bus data, and we're going to use timetable, we're going to use the bounding box to help us. And if we move over to the right hand side, it's got a little get button that you can press, and this gives you more information. The first thing that we really need to know is everything that we do requires an app ID and an app key. You need to make an account to get your own app ID and your own app key. However, they do produce a sort of testing version which we shall use, but there's no guarantee that that testing version will be the same tomorrow. So if you use this today, your program probably won't work tomorrow. You'll need your own app ID and your own key. They're free. All you need to do is create an account and you'll get those. Below are further boxes that you need to fill in. So we've got a maximum latitude, a maximum longitude. Now if you remember, we were looking at a box where the maximum, if we think of northeast as the maximum, the top right hand corner, it's asking for that latitude and that longitude, and the bottom left hand corner, it's asking for those two details. And once you've given that information, it will find out, or it will give you some information about the bus stops. We look a bit further down, we get an example of the data that's returned. So if we type in our latitude and longitude, it gives us some information about the bus. And this is the important one, the stops. This is giving us the stops that are within that box. It could be none, it could be several. Here we've got quite a few stops in the box. And what we really are looking for is this value here, the ATCO code. Every bus stop in the country, every single one, has a unique identifier, and this is the identifier, the ATCO code. if we use that value, we can say, okay, for this bus stop, what buses are available, etc. We can do a lot of work from there. So that's what we're looking for. If we, again, try this out, so let's put in some latitude and longitudes. Let's just choose their values. Let's copy and paste their values into the box. Oops, well, might as well type it. 51.5231 and the max longitude. Now we have to be careful here with minuses. If you are west or east, you're going to have a positive or a negative longitude. The same goes for north or south, but as we're in the northern hemisphere, it's almost always positive. We're not really here to discuss the maths or play around with the maths. We want to make it as simple as possible, so we're just going to use what they give us. But you need to be aware of it if you're dealing with anything which has a worldwide application. And minus 0.10958. There we go. Oops, comma, a decimal point. And we can fill in these items, how many pages, and the number of stops returned per page. You can put those in. We'll use the default values. Actually, if you leave them blank, it will assume the default values. So once we've filled in these query parameters, now what these are, if you remember, I said earlier in the address that we have, I haven't got it here, but we had a part before a question mark and the part after the question mark. Then this piece of information that we're using here is the part that comes after the question mark, and we're going to take a look at the whole thing. I'll explain all of that in a minute. If we use the get button, it gets the information that we're asking for. And what we get is the request URL. This is what I was talking about earlier. This is the part before the question mark. This is the part after the question mark. This part, the blue highlighted part now, are all the query parameters that we typed in earlier. Oh, whoops, gone too far. So this is all the query parameters here. The part before the question mark, this part was the information that was given here. Okay, so we've got all the information that we need before the question mark. I'm just going to point out one small thing here, is that the URLs are pretty much the same up to a point. So if we're going to just deal with buses, they've all got /UK/bus, then the actual URI changes. The piece between the curly braces are sort of variables that you need to fill in. The rest of it is what it is actually as you type it. So we can see that in this address here. We've got UK bus, and we've used the stops and the B box. So here we're using the bus, stops, and the B box .json. This is going to be useful. As you can see, there's a lot of different services that we can use. We can use the train services, so it does change with what we're using. Let me just close this down for a second. We can see that we've got public, we've got car journey, we've got cycle journey, tweets, and so on. It does change, but in our program we're only ever going to use the bus one, so we're going to sort of create just the URL up to a certain point, and then we're going to populate it afterwards with information. Let's see if I can get back to this get. I'm just going to press the get button. All the addresses up to that point are going to be the same. So it doesn't matter whether you're dealing with trains, cycles, or what have you. This part of the URL is never going to change. So we're going to sort of have that as a constant value in our program. We're going to add this part, not as a constant, but if we were going to use trains, we'd change that, and this information we're going to sort of put together depending on what we want. It's almost variable, and these will be variable. As I said, your app ID and your app key, you can make an account and get those values. If you don't, you are going to be using the values that come with this page, which will change from time to time. So that's an introduction to what we're going to do. Let's go over to Python and actually have a go at programming it.